Okay, so we need to let that layer dry because if we start again on the single ones, it's just going to run into it. But what we can do is we can start working on these ones that are up here that are not touching that row. So getting some of these other ones kind of placed. So that's what I'll do. And so keep in mind, so these in the background, these are very far away, right? But as they're coming closer to you, so like, for example, these that are in the midground here, they're going to be a little bit, or actually substantially bigger. These are that tall compared to these back here, like that tall. So just keep in mind, if you feel like you need to kind of map that out ahead of time, like right here, you're like, okay, that one would be about right there. And that's okay if it blends in, goes into that other thing because it's going to be covered up by it anyway. But then the ones that are kind of like right here are going to be, and you're doing kind of the same thing. You're kind of creating the peak of it, and then I kind of come down and just let my paintbrush kind of dance and create the idea of a tree there. Okay, I'm going to add more blue because this is getting, and a little bit of yellow too, just to give it so it didn't go too far on the blue side. I'm going to wash my brush because there's not any water or yellow left there. So what? There we go. So keep in mind the ones that are coming towards you will also be getting greener as well. I mean, obviously depending on the type of pine trees that you're painting, but so I'm kind of like putting some in here. You don't necessarily want to bring the bottom of this one all the way even with that one because then it's just going to look like two trees next to each other. I want to try to help create the idea of that depth. So I'm going through and kind of creating them so that they're kind of staggered in a sense. Now this is not quite dark enough. It's got more on the green side. There we go. A little darkness to that. So don't do too much. Like those kind of have a little too much. If you see it kind of puddling on there, then that's too much paint or too much, water, all of it on there. It'll take too long to dry and might end up mushrooming out in the process. So don't try to get too dark too quick is what I'm saying. Okay, and then like this one can be right here. So the idea is that you're kind of creating, I mean, these pine trees that specific ones that I'm creating are the triangular type shaped ones. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're creating these shapes and trying to create the idea of a tree, that you're kind of keeping that shape in mind. And letting your paintbrush dance, because you're going to have areas that the light's hitting it and areas that are in shadow. And because remember the left side of this one is my light source is coming from the right, so I will come back and put in shadows for the left side. So you want to do some that are overlapping, some that are smaller, closer back by the horizon line or by your line that you have back there. Because you don't want it to be just like a line of trees and then nothing until you start, seeing all these random trees all by themselves. So you want to kind of make sure you're still creating an idea of some back here every once in a while to kind of tie them all in together. Okay. Right here. And this one's quite close, so this one's going to be even bigger. So I'm kind of just tapping my brush, kind of creating the idea of a tree. This one wasn't in my example, I just wanted to do it right then. But I'm going to come over here and add some more right here, because I feel like this is kind of a little off balance now. Maybe another one right here too. But, you also have baby trees, full-grown trees, so different sizes. So using that. I have a little bit of like a bluish green mixture up there from bringing the blue over. I'm kind of using some of that to go back in and create a little bit more depth, but also some more shadows. Because you're going to have shadows on the left side, but you're also going to have shadows inside the tree because the branches kind of go in there. But I'm basically, like I said, I'm just kind of dabbing my brush onto the paper. Now that back row is probably dry enough that you can come back in with that color too. Because mine's very light color, so I want to definitely add a bit more to that. I got to make some more though because I'm out. So making that kind of that blue-green, dark blue-green color. Be careful if any of your front trees here overlapped into it and are still wet, because if you are going over it with this, it's going to bleed down into those, which may be okay if it's the side that's supposed to be highlighted, or I mean in shadow, but it may not be. Mine kind of went into one that wasn't really supposed to be into it, so I got a little ahead of myself and started doing ones and then started making them go across that. Okay, so I'm going to leave those alone for the moment because they're kind of all still a little too wet to be adding another layer onto yet. I'm going to pull off some of this because I can see where it's pooling, where I don't want that to happen too much because I don't want it to take forever to dry, and I also don't want it to mushroom out. Okay. So now what we're going to do is now we are going to focus on getting some of this stuff in the front, some of the grass, first we're going to need to get the brown, the bank of the river on there. So we're going to start with some brown on that. So my brown still got some little water in it from earlier when I activated it for the thing. I'm going to bring it over here into that area that orangey brownish tan color was in. And actually I'm going to bring some of that over into this. I don't want it to be that pure brown. I mean, if you want to do it that way, you can. It's up to you. That burnt sienna is a little too reddish. Unless it was a ground with a lot of clay in it, it probably wouldn't be quite that red. Okay, I think that might be good. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, you can kind of see it on the example, where I have gone through and added the brown in here and over here, but I also did it up there too. So let's just go through, and this would be a good time that, again, if you're not very good with making the small lines with your rounded brush, actually I'll just switch so y'all can see it. I'll switch to a skinny, like detailed brush. Let me try this one. Yeah, this will be good. Okay, and then that way you can get those little fine lines because you don't want your banks to be too thick. So essentially what I'm doing is, you think about the angle that you're at as a viewer. You would definitely see the left side bank over here because it's facing us. The right side bank is facing, like the open wide part would be facing that way towards the mountains. So, I mean, it would be facing out a little bit, but we may not be able to see it quite as well as we can see this side. So use those things to your advantage to help you create depth in your paintings. So if you kind of go through there, and it's going to dissipate where you don't see it anymore, right? As it gets to the horizon line, just like the actual river itself does. So it's going to be thicker whenever, you know, it's exposed to you like that. Whereas once it starts curving here, it's facing that way, right? More so. So we're not going to see as much of the bank there, but we'll start seeing it again when it's right here. Okay. So, and I'm kind of take it down into the water a little bit. And then I also am bringing it up into the grass, but you kind of don't want it to be just a straight line. You want it to kind of blend in. So what I'm going to do is I have paint on my brush, but I'm going to go ahead and wipe it off. And then I'm going to come over here and just kind of pull some off. But what I'm doing is I'm slowly like blending it into my grass. But each time I'm cleaning my brush off so that it's not too much. So see how it kind of will blend? And it won't be that harsh, crisp line. And it kind of creates the idea of a thick bank, and the value gradation happens so that it kind of just blends out, and then it turns back into grass. Okay, so you do that up here too a little bit. Maybe not quite as much up here because this is further away from you, and we are going to have some grass up here anyway that's going to cover some of this. Okay. You would see it here too though, so I'm going to go ahead and put some right here as well. So you want it to get to kind of where, you know, and the river's not always, it's not always a constant width of the bank that's showing. Sometimes there's a large area, sometimes it's a skinny area, sometimes there's none at all, it's just like a cliff or something, you know, or it goes, the water comes right up to it. So it kind of just depends, but the idea is variety and not just outlining it both, because then it's going to look more like a road or something, right? It's not going to look right. So you can kind of see how I've done it here with this one. So like over here, you cannot see the brown here, but you can start seeing it right here at this area. You can see it there and kind of goes around that way. And I've also created this area that ends up looking kind of like a trail, like a trail of an animal or something, you know, that's their little watering hole. So you could do something like that. So kind of creating this a little bit bigger right here, kind of like an indentation, you know, where the thing kind of comes through, and then kind of creating, just letting your pencil kind of, or not pencil, paintbrush kind of dance every once in a while to make it look like the water has, the grass has been kind of beat down and it's formed, you know, like a dirt path that animals would come to get water. You don't want to just do a straight line. You want to kind of just make it look like it's kind of here and there. Just the idea of one, just lightly. And then just soften this out on the edges. You don't want it to be a crisp line, so that it makes it look like it's kind of, you might even do one area that's kind of down here. Oh, too much water. It's a little darker. You could even pull a little bit of that bluish green color down here. Teeny tiny bit, not much. Oh, too much. To kind of help blend with that and create a different color there. There's a little bit of a shadow in a sense. Too much. And then if it gets too much, then just grab your brown, go back over it, blend with it. It'll just make yourself a darker brown. There we go. Something kind of like that. Too much liquid on there though. Okay. And then we're going to put grass here in a second anyway, so it's going to end up being covered up there. Okay, so let's see. I think my trees are good enough that I can go back around and let's get another dose there. I'm going to keep using this brush just because it's small enough and it'll work well for it. So go back and get some of this. I'm actually going to add a tiny bit more blue to this, a little bit darker, because now we're going to go back in and add a bit of shadows in there. And we want it to be a little bit darker than the current color of the trees. Okay, so I'm going to go back through and too much on there. This brush is longer, so it holds a little bit more water than some other small ones. And again, like I said, you will every once in a while have, you know, the little dabs of darkness on the right side of the tree, even though the sun's hitting it there, you'll still have a little dab there that has some depth that goes into the core of the tree and that shadow that you're seeing. And it's not all going to be highlight. This will help create that realistic, more so realistic idea of the tree, as well as depth and dimension into it. So what I'm doing, I'm kind of just dabbing my paintbrush here and there to kind of let it dance, creating the left side a little bit darker in shadow, and then putting a couple here and there on the right side. So just continue through, do that for all your trees. Okay, and if you want to, if there's nothing, there's not any super wet areas, you can also create some shadows if you want, by getting a little tiny bit. Where did that go? Oh, there we go. So kind of this color here that we had for that, maybe add a little bit of that green to that brown color that we made for the banks of the river. Kind of like, you don't want it too dark, but kind of just create an idea of something that stands out against the tree itself and something that stands out against the grass. But kind of reading it kind of like a shadow. But essentially, I mean, all a shadow is a darker shade of whatever the ground is, right? So that's why I went with that color, because that's how we made the grass earlier that's here, kind of that dead look. But like, it would be real obvious in this tree here, that's right here in your foreground, right? And you want to do this kind of stuff before you start doing your grass and foliage and stuff, because that would be underneath that, and you don't want to have to come back to do that after. So you can also ground your trees a lot by kind of putting that color right up underneath it, blending those two together, making a little bit of a darker color than what's on the tree. Something like that. It's gonna fade off into where you can't really see its shape, right? Because of the way that shadows work, but it doesn't have to perfectly mimic the shape of the tree. It's just going to be something that's kind of like a sideways triangle that's kind of elongated. That's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just kind of creating, again, just an extra level of depth to your painting that you can do. Okay, I think I'm good with that. Okay, so last step now is going to be your grass. So last step is going to be all the little detail of the grass. So I'm going to stick with a small brush like this. If you have not switched over to this, or if you switch something different, then go back to this, because that's going to be a lot easier to do this type of grass stuff with, because you need it to be, and preferably a round, because it has a point on the end of it, rather than a one that is flat, because you're going to need to be doing kind of like the flick of your wrist to get the wisp, the tapered look of the end of the grass. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Let's mix up some colors first. So we've got, what color is this? This was from the tree initially, wasn't it? Actually, this might work well. Yeah, I think this color will work well. The color that we used that was in this palette, so whatever one that is for you, but it's kind of just basically a light green color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through at the beginning, and what I'm doing is I'm just literally creating little, and mine's very, actually might add a little bit more. It's very, very light. I don't want it to be super dark at this point. We'll come back and do shadows after. Right now we're kind of doing that, either the lightest tone or the mid-tone. Maybe a combination of them depending on where it's at and how much, because you can tell this is a little bit darker than these right here. So it depends on how much paint you have on your brush and water. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm literally just flicking my fingers, these fingers that are holding the paintbrush, and as it's getting to the end of where how tall I want my grass to be, I'm pulling it away from the paper. So it's creating a tapered look, and it's kind of like a little flick of your hand. And the next thing you also want to think about doing is, you don't want all of them to go the same way consistently. Every once in a while you want to do one the opposite curve way, because grass, that's how grass grows, right? It doesn't all just grow in a perfectly little, parenthesis type shape over and over again. You're going to have grass that's going to the left, some that's, angled more to the right. You're going to have some that's different heights, especially when you get into, woodland grassy areas like this. You're going to have all different sizes and angles of where it's going and all that. Now, when we get closer to the shoreline, or the bank of your river, you're going to want to have it where that it's growing out of your bank, right, or right to the right of it, and some of it that's going to overlap over into your river like this, and then some that comes back out and goes the opposite direction, okay, and maybe some that kind of sprigs out the top like that. So to make it look like grass, that you're going to make sure you do that. So I'll stick with this side for a moment. I'm going to, and you don't want to necessarily put it all the way up and down it. There's going to be pockets of areas that maybe don't have any grass. You know, maybe the animals have beat it down or something, or maybe just for some reason it's just not growing there. So every once in a while you can kind of create some little areas of openness if you want, or if you wanted to have your little trail going all the way across. Maybe this is, you know, a hiking trail and people just jump over the river because it's a little bitty stream instead of a bigger one. Okay, and so then you can kind of continue on with getting, just make sure that your grass is where it's starting, is on the actual grass, and then you want it to overlap because it's going to help create more depth in your painting with it overlapping your water. And it's also going to read more legit because typically, you know, grass does do that, lean over into the river. Now, as it's getting further away, then it's going to start dissipating and you're not going to be able to see it anymore. Okay, so if you want to make them they should be getting smaller as they're coming this way, but and then it gets to the point where you can't even see it anymore. Okay, so then it's going to just look like the flat land like we have over here. Okay, so that is our base color. So I will be coming back to put darker layers on this, okay? But now I'm going to move over to the left side and do the same thing. I don't know if y'all notice, I'm holding my paintbrush like this. So see how my finger's up here? And I'm holding it straight up and down when I'm doing this. And the reason I have my finger up here like this is because it helps me keep control of the paintbrush and helps me keep it vertical at a 90-degree angle to my paper. So figure out whatever works for you in order to make this happen, but that's what I do. Okay. And again, your grass doesn't have to go all the way across the front and side. You can have breaks in it. It doesn't have to be all perfectly laid out. You just want to create the idea of it and make sure that you're creating variety as far as your grass going different directions, because you certainly don't want them all the same, or it will look very elementary. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit right here by the little water hole area where they come to, so they could also be protected, the animals, you know, like the little animals that are coming to drink. Typically they like to hide, you know, so they'll have an area where it's hidden by all that. And then one on the other side. So I'm going to skip over the area where they would be coming to drink. And then again, as you're getting further away, they should be getting smaller and to the point where they just kind of, no more can you see them. Be careful, if you get too much, like right there I got too much, so I need to go wipe my paintbrush off, and then I need to go soak some of that back up because I don't want that to be sitting there taking forever to dry. Okay, so otherwise then you also see in the example that I've also put some little random, you know, kind of sprigs here and there. I could have put a little shrub here, but again, just kind of creating a little bit more interest, visual interest in your painting, because in reality those things probably would be there and you would see them. You don't have to, but you want to practice a little bit more of your grass painting skills. You kind of just have some little tufts here and there. Sometimes you'd have just like little lines here and there, you know, that kind of just create the idea of, you know, a little tuft of grass or something happening there. A little shrub or something maybe. All of them don't have to be tufts of grass that are, you know, real tall and all together going different directions. They can be other plants, other, you know, little things. If you wanted to create like a little shrub here, you know, just get a little bit of that darker green, kind of creating, the bottom of it would be flat. Let your pencil, or excuse me, your paintbrush kind of dance, kind of create something like that that would be, you know, recognizable as some sort of a little shrub. Then you can come back and put a little bit more as far as depth in there. Too much there. Making sure that at the base of it, it is relatively, it's not necessarily going to be flat. It would just be kind of, mostly though, like in the same angle or same row. And then you can kind of put some darker shading at the bottom so that it makes it look like it's the bottom of it and it's in shadow. Okay, so because my grass was so light, it's all dry now. So now I'm ready to come back through and I'm going to add actually almost that color that I just had there, not quite that. I'm going to bring that over into this. A little bit of that over here to make this a little bit darker. I don't want it to be quite that dark. So this is now going to end up being, again, depending on how much you put on there, it could be your shadow or it could be your midtone. Don't get too much though, because then you end up with a splatter there. Okay, that's not quite dark enough. You want it to be, to stand out from your other ones you already did. A little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Just enough that it looks like every once in a while you're going to have some shadows. And that's the other thing, is don't just do it over and over again just as much as you've done the other. You want to just, every once kind of give the idea of shadows. So you're kind of just putting them here and there, not a lot. The way that my other one worked, I actually had quite a bit of variance in color in my value in the grass I already have. So it's kind of already reading as it's got dimension. However, we've also got this you need to have it darker at the foreground. Sorry, I forgot what I was saying for a second. But it also, like I said, gives you more dimension too. And the area of where it's like right here along the shore, you're probably going to have it darker because it's going to be a lot of shading, or shadows, excuse me, because of the fact that this is like all bunched in there together. And then you also have like the soil and all that underneath it, and you know, the water. There's like a lot of different things all coming together at once right here. So you kind of can even come through there, make that a little bit darker. And that will really push your river down. You kind of can see I've done it a little bit more in this one. So see how this area is a little bit darker? And that's because it, like, all in there, you see the grass coming out, but as far as the kind of the mid section of the grass seems to be a little bit more solid. And that's because I wanted that to be, you know, show that there's more depth there. There's shadows in there. The light is certainly not touching it. You also want to make sure that you are always picking up your paintbrush. I probably should have said this earlier. Hopefully you're doing this by now. You're picking up your paintbrush with each stroke. You're definitely not leaving it down and just going back and forth and doing a zigzag, because that will not create the right effect. And you're also wanting to make sure that you're tapering at the end, you know, starting at the bottom where the grass grows and kind of coming out and tapering at when it stops. You can also bring some out. I'm not liking how this is looking so patterned, so I'm going to bring some out a little bit further in this area, just to kind of make it look like it's coming out a little bit thicker here. Gotta be careful, because then it'll start just looking like a green blob. Okay, so that's pretty good. I do kind of want, I want this to be a little bit darker though. I think it will look better if there's just a little bit more. So I'm going to add a wee bit more blue and give, not quite that much. Get more to the green side. Okay, so that is pretty much completed, I think. It's a little bit of a different color. scheme than this one, but that's okay. This one I, spent a little bit more time putting more layers on, but I just want to show you the basics of that. So this one's a little bit lighter, but it still gets the job done and still looks correct. So again, like I said, at the end of the day, you're the artist. You get to choose the colors, how many layers you do, but you do want to do it enough that you can create some substance to your painting. So, okay, so what you want to do now is make sure that the entire thing is dry before you remove your tape. Don't take your tape off until it is fully dry, okay? Or else it will rip your paper. So I'm going to start with this one. That's the last one. So go backwards in the order that you put them on. Remember turning it at a 90-degree angle and slowly, carefully tearing it off. Okay. Oh, that one tore the corner. Okay, and there we are. So it ends up looking like little mountains, like a little island back there. And then this one, and then there you are with that. Now just make sure you take a picture of it and get it submitted. And clean up.